Oh, there he is. Okay. But Eric, you still there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of wondering, like, how did you guys get going with sessions? What made you go that route instead of full bore, the usual level of alcohol?
Oh, yeah, that's an easy one. We live in Texas where it's hot most of the year. So the idea of a 14% or 15% sweet mead just isn't very appealing when it's 100 degrees outside. So we started making some lower alcohol things, and then we realized, hey, it takes a little bit of work on the recipe in order to make it not be overly watery or have a thin body. But once we figured out some of the techniques in order to make it work, we started pushing the envelope and said, well, how low can we go? And discovered that the 6.5% seems to be the sweet spot for us. It also allows us to produce a product that people can afford to. If you go much above that, then the cost of the materials is going to make it cost prohibitive to put on draft. So that's also a consideration that we had in order to try to push mead into that segment where it really hadn't been before to compete with cider.
Well, I'll tell you, I tried all your meads when I was down there this summer, and like every single one. And that was one of the things that really caught my attention was how much mouthfeel your sessions have, because a lot of the sessions that I've tried are, they're fine, they're good meads, but they just don't have a ton of mouthfeel. They're kind of thin, and that was something that I found. You've got a mouthfeel that I would associate with a full on 11 to 14% mead. And what can you share with the listeners about how to get that? I mean, basically, we want to try to teach them how to make good sessions without giving up all your secrets, of course. But
Exactly. We don't have a whole lot of big secrets. It would be hard to replicate what we were doing unless you have our equipment and our process. But a little bit of tannin definitely is a must. That's a big contributor to the mouthfeel because we do add tannins, and we add them up front in the beginning of the primary fermentation. And that way, we found that they tend to settle out if you add them too late in the process. So if you're going to add some tannin, definitely you want to add it up in the primary in the beginning. And then the other thing that we do is we ferment dry and we back sweeten and with the honey for anything that's under 10%. And by doing that, I think that also contributes in mouthfeel as well.
How much tannin are you adding? I mean, is that something that you can tell us? I mean, I think that's probably one of the things a lot of people are a little hesitant about.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number because we have this complicated 2-step formula, so it's actually the numbers don't translate. But I think it's around a quarter gram per gallon of tannin, I believe.
And is that wine tannin or gall nuts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wine tannin.
Right. Have you tried some of the tannin products that you can buy from Scott's Labs? Any of those types of tannins?
Yeah. We use all Scott Labs. We've been very happy with them, and then also in pretty much all the Scott Lab stuff I know you can get from More Beer, and there are a few other homebrew stores that sell online that you can buy most of the Scott Labs. I definitely have been happy with theirs.
That's pretty. I wouldn't have thought of that. That makes a lot of sense, though. Now you say it.
The other thing that I didn't mention too is that for sessions, I think varietal honeys just work better because if you try to use a more neutral honey, or a lot of folks like to use their local wildflower, but I find that it just doesn't have enough character. So, as much as I would love to use the local Texas honey, it just doesn't work in this format. So we use orange blossom for ours, but any good varietal honey will make a good low alcohol mead.
Why? What was the problem with the wildflower? Was it just not flavorful enough, or?
Yeah, certainly our wildflower honey here is just not very flavorful, and I think that seems to be the case for most of the country. I've had a few exceptions, certainly, but for the most part, most wildflower honeys just seem to be lacking in flavor and body. So if you're doing a sock mead, maybe that doesn't matter as much. But when you're only using 1.8 pounds per gallon, that's not very much.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you want the flavour to be a bit more bold then, because you're not using much of it. It's got to stretch further. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly, and that's why actually one of my favorite honeys which we don't do one commercially, but I've been really jonesing to want to do one, a homebrew one, because we had a really great one in the Texas Mead Cup that I came across the table is buckwheat. So it might be too much, it might be overpowering in a 4 pound per gallon mead, but at 1.8 pounds per gallon, 2 pounds per gallon, it's actually quite lovely.
Well, thank you for adding yet another thing to my to-brew list.
I was just saying how I wanted someone to bring me a traditional buckwheat to the Meads Cup. Is that a possibility?
He wants to taste a buckwheat mead. They don't have buckwheat in Australia, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they got. But you should have been. Did you come? You came to the Mazer last year, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, no, not you, Hamish. I was talking to Eric. I know you were there. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I spent 3 weeks with you.
I know, right? I didn't notice. I was too busy talking to Bruce.
Yeah, we'll definitely be there this year because we're about to launch into Colorado here in the next couple of weeks. So we'll definitely be up there. For sure.
Hamish brought all these really cool Australian honeys last year, and he had all these little samples. So he was doing like sort of random samplings with people would sit down and get to try all the Aussie honeys, and it was way cool because they were totally different than what we have here. I mean, like, entirely different. Totally different. There was even the cat pee honey. It was really interesting. But yeah, David just said the same thing.
Thank you, David. Yeah.
But they had some really interesting. There was some really interesting honeys in there, but they don't have anything like buckwheat. I mean, like nothing like buckwheat.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's wanted to taste buckwheat, a buckwheat traditional, and a Tupelo traditional. We're trying to figure out where we can find Tupelo because there wasn't any this year, And I know there's a few people that have Tupelo traditionals. One of them is St. Ambrose. I'll see if I can get a bottle.
And meadow foam, all those other wonderful things that we talk about. But
I should be able to help you with meadow foam. I'm going to do a meadow foam this winter. I think I've got another 3 gallons of it left. I got to check.
Super.
Cool.
I can't find that to purchase anywhere, ever.
Who was selling it last? Was it Miller's? I think it was Miller's that was selling it last. It's hard to come by, and it's almost as expensive as Tupelo. It's pretty pricey because it's a small crop every year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, every year.
It is, and this year was also really, really limited, and I was not able to get any this year, which made me very sad.
Well, you know what it is too is these damn meaderies keep buying it up, and us poor home meat makers can't lay our hand. It used to be it was the exclusive province of us home meat makers, and all y'all didn't. Well, there wasn't any meaderies, and so there wasn't any of them buying it. But David Webb is saying Flying Bee Honey Farm usually has meadow foam.
Cool.
Yeah. But, meadow foam is my favorite. That tastes like toasted marshmallows. Nummies.
Yep.
So, just going back to the tannins, I've got this pear that I have no idea what it is near me that makes the most tannic brew you can think of. I just made a pear juice perry with honey, and you can't even see the honey for the tannin and the acid, even though it's a 12%. And so I'm just wondering, would you recommend maybe throwing one of them in up front, or a half a cup of juice or something like that of really tannic fruit?
That actually sounds really great. And another one that I've always thought would work really well that we haven't tried yet is tamarinds, because it's such a potent flavor and it gives so much mouthfeel that I think it would work really well.
I want to still sort of call it a traditional, so I only want to put a little bit in, but yeah, I think it's got so much tannin in it that it'd you could get away with half a cup of juice in a gallon, and it would have a major effect.
Yeah, I'd love to taste the result.
I have a question as far as we're talking about mouthfeel. Have you ever tried to use glycerin? I imagine you have.
So we did try glycerin. I didn't find that it gave the effect that we wanted. I've used it in traditionals before that I thought were lacking in body, and it worked great in there.
Mm-hmm. How about the OptiWhite product from Scott's Labs?
We haven't tried that particular one yet.
I see.
I found for some means, depending on what you're doing, you can use the red wine tannin. For other ones, the white wine tannin works. But definitely experiment. One of the things that I like to do with tannin, it's really easy to do bench trials with it. So you can just grab a couple of different types and just experiment and see what you think works best for your preference.
And is your product, when you ship it, is it clear or is it dusty? For lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We sterile filter all of our meads because we had issues with that in the past with re-fermentation. So sterile filtering removes the possibility of re-fermentation.
I'm curious.
Wine yeast are pretty hungry little critters. They like to keep eating. They don't like to stop.
Yes, they do. I'm curious.
Even if it's on the store shelf.
Have you found that after you filter out, have you found any settling long-term later down the road? The reason I ask is because I'm starting to think that I'm seeing some tannins, even though I filter just with the plate filter to 0.5, but I'm finding that later down the road, even though it's crystal clear when I bottle, that I'm ending up with a little bit of dust in the bottle, and I'm starting to think that it's tannins that maybe polymerize after the fact and changes their molecular weight and causes them to drop out. Do you think I'm shooting in the right direction, or do you have any comment to that?
No, I've had that happen before. So we have a Metafoam traditional. The first batch that we did, we only ran it through a coarse plate filter.
Right.
And it was crystal clear for the first year in the bottle. And now it's cloudy because it dropped a bunch of sediment, and it's definitely tannin. Without a doubt, it came out.
Is there a way to know for sure?
Seen that. I've never seen that happen with anything that we sterile filter.
Uh-huh.
So
is there
I
a way
whatever.
We can test? Darn it! I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you want to test to find out what the sediment is?
Well, I was just wondering if I've thought it's tannins, but I've also wondered, was it proteins later that would come back and double up and then fall out?
I don't remember what was said, but there was just a few days ago, there was a thread on the Facebook Mead Makers group, and there was a response there about how to test sediment to determine what it is.
That was John talking then, and I can't remember. I don't remember if that was on proteins or something else. So, but I'll have to go revisit that again. But you're pretty certain that what we're talking about is tannins, then, yes?
Yeah, I'm. Even though I didn't test it, I'm fairly certain that's what I've seen in my mead.
I see. Thank you.
Most of the pad filters remove about 92% of the particulates. And the cartridge filters that we use are high efficiency, and then they're 99%, and the sterile